Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and as ever I would appreciate succinct questions and answers to match in order to get in as many members as possible, and those members seeking a supplementary should press the request to speak button during the relevant question. And at question number 1 I call Liz Smith.
To ask the Scottish Government what its policy is in relation to employment-based routes to teacher training.
Minister Graham Day.
The Scottish Government is supportive of a range of university-based routes into teaching, and we are open to working with our university providers to consider alternative routes which lead to an appropriate teaching qualification. The member will be aware that we offer bursaries for career changers wishing to become teachers in a most hard-to-fill subject. It is, however, the General Teaching Council for Scotland that determines what constitutes a recognised teaching qualification.
Liz Smith.
Can I thank Mr Day for that answer? I'm asking the question because of concerns that have been expressed to me amongst those who have been working with the University of Buckingham as mentors to PGCE students, that this may be the last year that the University of Buckingham offers its very highly regarded and rigorous training course in Scotland. And allegedly that's because of changes to Scottish Government policy on employment-based routes into teacher training. So can I ask the Minister for some verification on this, and if he could provide me with details about what's actually happened here?
Minister.
The University of Buckingham offering was at no time an employment route into teaching as such. It was a transitional arrangement which followed the requirement for teachers working in the independent school sector to be registered with the GTCS, which was introduced in 2017. The University of Buckingham delivered a top-up programme to enable that to happen, but it was only accredited for a small category of teachers with a limited timescale in which to complete that. I hope that provides Liz Smith with sufficient clarity, but if it doesn't, if I haven't quite captured the essence of her question, I'm more than happy to engage with her further on that.
Supplementary, Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can the Minister confirm that the Scottish Government is still committed to a graduate teaching profession?
Minister.
I would say to the member that the Scottish Government is absolutely committed to the teaching profession full stop, but it will always engage with opportunities to universities to see how we enhance that further.
And a supplementary from Willie Rennie, who is joining us online. Mr Rennie.
The Minister will know that I'm concerned about the high levels of unemployment, but also short-term contracts in the teaching profession. And this won't be particularly attractive to those who are looking to switch career into teaching. What is the Minister doing about recruiting the 3,500 extra teachers promised, but also the reduction in teacher contact time that will be essential to recruit those extra teachers?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, as Mr Rennie knows, this is not my area of responsibility, but I'm more than happy to write back to him in full detail on that, although I do know he had an exchange with the Cabinet Secretary in the Chamber not so long ago, where I think she answered this quite fully.
Question number 2, Evelyn Tweed.
to ask the Scottish Government what support it is providing to local authorities to ensure that any subsidised bus routes are maintained.
Minister Fiona Hislop.
Local authorities receive funding from the Scottish Government via the General Revenue Grant and have a duty to consider supporting socially necessary services which are otherwise not commercially viable. In 2021-22, local authorities spent £55 million supporting bus services in this way.
Evelyn Tweed.
Stirling Council have recently launched their budget consultation, which includes 3 options for public transport, all of which would see cuts to the subsidised X10 and C60 service, vital in linking Stirling's rural communities. To ask the Scottish Government what conversations take place with local authorities to ensure there is an awareness of the importance of the provision of bus services in rural areas.
Minister.
Under the Transport Act 1985, local authorities have a duty to identify where there is a social need for particular bus services and can subsidise these at their discretion. This means that local transport authorities can provide subsidy for services that are not provided on a commercial basis, but this is entirely a matter for the local authority to determine, and the Scottish Government has no powers to intervene in these matters. Scotland Act 2019, local transport authorities now have powers enabling them to run their own services. These powers sit alongside their existing powers to subsidise local services. However, it is not for local transport authority to decide if they want to use these powers. It's for them to decide whether they want to use these powers to improve services. And I did discuss rural transport bus issues with the regional transport partnerships only this week.
Supplementary, Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The M2 bus that runs from Toryglen to Castlemilk in my region is an hourly service regularly used by older people and the only bus that serves the bottom of Spittal and Dunmuir Drive. For the past month, it's reduced to an hourly service and recently to no service at all due to repairs, because it's taken over a month for that and no replacement. So can I ask the Minister, what can she do to establish why this has gone on so long, and what mechanism can she put in place to ensure replacement services are there and now and in the future?
Minister.
I'm sure the member will be aware that the bus services are either run by commercial operators in the deregulated market or, as we've just discussed, subsidised by the local authority, but again run by private companies. I do appreciate, and this is general across all transport areas, that repairs and replacement of parts is having pressure on all transport issues, but these are best placed by her as MSP, making representations on behalf of our constituents directly with the bus company, and if she's not met with the bus company, I strongly encourage her to do so.
And supplementary, Mark Ruskell.
Thank you. Can I ask the Minister about the importance of local political leadership here? Because my understanding is that Stirling Council have had money from the Community Bus Fund to develop new local rural services, and that Lochlan and the Trossachs National Park are also committed to establishing new routes, working with the Council, and that's going to be included in the forthcoming park plan. So it seems that all the ingredients are there to restore rural bus services. What's lacking is the local political leadership to pull it all together and use the new powers in the Transport Act.
Minister.
Well, it's disappointing to hear that bus services are deteriorating in the Stirling area. It is a matter for local political leadership, just as it's a matter for national political leadership to put transport front and centre in terms of priorities. Anybody who has got any concerns about private operators can obviously approach the Traffic Commissioner as well. But also in terms of providing tools for enabling, we've got the 2019 Act, a whole suite of different regulations coming into force, are already in force, giving more powers and responsibilities for local authorities to use. And the Community Bus Fund is intended to support local transport authorities in considering the Act powers and to improve local services. And over £5 million.
Thank you, Minister. We'll need to move to the next question. Monica Lennon, question number 4, please.
To ask the Scottish Government what its priorities are for COP28.
Cabinet Secretary Mary McCallan.
Presiding Officer, in summary, our principal objectives for COP28 are that our leadership on loss and damage builds momentum for urgent funding, that our co-chairmanship of the Under 2 Coalition supports action and commitments, that our commitment to low carbon energy under a just transition to net zero, particularly around offshore wind and hydrogen, can influence others to do more to achieve net zero, and that we will advance international relationships, attract investment in Scotland and enhance Scotland's global reputation, particularly on renewable energy. And we will also continue using our platform to platform the voices of women, young people and the Global South in COP28 debate and action.
Monica Lennon.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her response. Now that the European Union has decided to criminalise offences comparable to ecocide, will the Scottish Government take the opportunity at COP28 to meet with governments and campaigners who are advancing ecocide law in light of the Government's commitment to maintain alignment with the EU on environmental protection?
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome Monica Lennon's question. I have a very full programme indeed at COP28, which includes a number of meetings centring on that twin crisis of nature loss. The Scottish Government is absolutely committed to protecting Scotland's environment. Monica Lennon is right to recognise the progress at EU level. We will assess the final revised EU Environmental Crime Directive against our own policy to seek to maintain alignment where we can with EU law. And I will, of course, take this important matter into a number of the conversations that I'll be having at COP28.
A supplementary, Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The climate credentials of the current UK Government are in absolute tatters, and the only thing the Labour Government in waiting seem capable of is flip-flopping and U-turns. How can Scotland work with the international community at COP28 to try and effect a positive outcome and show the world that our views and ambitions for the future of the planet are not represented by Westminster?
Cabinet Secretary.
Karen Adams is absolutely right to point out how much of a leader Scotland is already recognised as in the climate space, not only in our own commitments and our actions, particularly on renewables and nature-based solutions, but equally on our pursuit of climate justice. We will be using our platform at COP. The First Minister is already there. I will follow as he returns home. But the point is that no nation has all the answers or the means to respond at the scale that's required. That's why national leadership and representation at fora like COP28 is so important, and Scotland will use its role to our full potential.
Question number 5, Finlay Carson.
To ask the Scottish Government what funding it is providing for regeneration and economic renewal projects in the south of Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Our place-based investment programme has directly provided over £18 million to councils in the South of Scotland region since 2021, and the area has received over £48 million from other Scottish Government regeneration funding programmes. The Scottish Government is also investing £85 million in the Borderlands deal and £300 million in the Edinburgh and South East Scotland deal, supporting a wide range of projects and programmes designed to stimulate economic growth. In addition, we have allocated over £34 million to the South of Scotland Enterprise Agency in 23-24 to support economic and community development across the region.
Finlay Carson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response. I would also recognise the funding the UK Government's Levelling Up Fund has brought to projects like the George Hotel in Stranraer. The Cabinet Secretary may be aware that in April 2016 the Scottish Government committed to invest £6 million towards the regeneration of Stranraer when the ferry port closed. Unfortunately, previous SNP Labour administrations at Dumfries and Galloway Council and the Scottish Government have failed to deliver a process to draw down this money, despite knowing that this investment could bring transformational change, jobs and opportunities for local people. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what discussions he's had with the current administration and what progress has been made to draw down this money?
Cabinet Secretary.
So we have been in constant dialogue with Dumfries and Galloway Council and made it clear that we cannot release funds in this space in the absence of detailed proposals. Officials met with the Council representatives on the 13th of November to discuss Stranraer's place plan and underlined the need for them to develop and submit detailed investment proposals for us to consider. Stranraer has already benefited from £2.8 million from the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund. We have also committed £16 million through the Borderlands growth deals to support the redevelopment of Stranraer Marina, focused on creating new jobs and drawing in new visitors to the area. So I hope that gives Mr Carson some reassurance.
Supplementary, Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've previously raised regeneration and economic renewal in terms of addressing the many vacant, abandoned and derelict sites across South Scotland, like the Arches in Stranraer and the Interfloor Factory in Dumfries. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that it is crucial that funding to address derelict sites ensures that rural areas like D&G are included, and will he agree to meet with me to discuss how these sites can be better addressed?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I thank Emma Harper for that question. Yes, I'm happy to meet Emma Harper to discuss that and to discuss the fact that the vacant and derelict land investment programme is open to all local authorities, including those in the south of Scotland and Dumfries and Galloway, to apply and to assist them in being able to tackle the persistence of vacant and derelict land in the areas that they are covering.
Question number 6, Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what action it will take to increase the use of buses across Scotland.
Minister Fiona Hislop.
Earlier this year, we co-funded a successful national marketing campaign with bus operators, encouraging people to return to bus or use it for the first time. The campaign reached an audience of millions, prompted over 32,000 visits to the choosethebus.scot website, and increased older and disabled persons' concessionary journeys by 5.8% during the campaign period. Additionally, our concessionary travel schemes provide access to free bus travel to over 2 million people in Scotland, including around 170,000 people in Fife, with over 3 million journeys every week. These schemes help people cut costs, making sustainable travel a more attractive option.
Alec Rowley.
While I have repeatedly welcomed the under-22 bus pass scheme in this chamber, I have also repeatedly raised the issue of unaffordable and ever-increasing bus fares for those without the benefit of a concessionary scheme. The UK Government has introduced a blanket cap of £2 to all bus fares in England to help tackle the issue during the cost of living crisis. Will the Minister examine the case and cost for a similar fare cap in Scotland that would benefit all bus users?
Minister.
Well, the rest of the UK don't have the generous concessionary bus scheme that Scotland has, with over 2 million of our population benefiting from it. However, the member makes an important point about working people who can't afford the bus fares that wouldn't be eligible for the concessionary schemes. And it's why our Fair Fares Review, which is due to report shortly, is looking at the balance of this and how do we ensure that if we're tackling poverty, one of the biggest blights that we see as a result of successive Westminster governments is in-work poverty, and anything this government can do to help relieve it, we can. But let's be realistic. The budget that we are facing is very serious indeed if we want to achieve what he and I want to do, is tackle poverty properly in Scotland.
Supplementary, Graeme Simpson.
Thank you very much. And just to follow up on that point, I think that the Minister is perhaps missing an opportunity here, because we could have a Scottish bus fare cap if she chose to examine it. So to ask her again, is she prepared to at least look at the proposal and look at what it might cost?
Minister.
Well, the member makes an important point, but he also, I think, fails to reflect that Scotland does not have a centralised system in terms of what can be done in local authority areas. We're in the process of bringing through the regulations that will give more powers, for example, over franchising, and powers over running of services are already there. So unless he wants to centralise all decision-making on transport, then I think that would be problematic in our context. However, I met with the Regional Transport Partnership, which includes transport partnerships from across Scotland, and I think all of us, whether it's in local authorities, regional transport partnerships, or indeed in national government, are thinking about how we can do things in a better way. But I don't think centralising everything, as he's suggesting, may be the route forward that our councils and local authorities would want.
Question number 7, Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it's had with East Lothian Council regarding the future of local public service provision in the area, including in relation to the Loch Centre in Trinent.
Minister Joe Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. The Scottish Government places great importance on community sports and leisure facilities, and the Deputy First Minister met with representatives of East Lothian Council on 23rd of August. We are fully aware that local councils, like all public authorities, are facing challenging financial circumstances, and that's why we increased the resources available to local government by over £793 million in 23-24. 23-24, East Lothian Council will receive £221.5 million to fund local services, which equates to an extra £8.1 million to support vital day-to-day services, or an additional 3.8% compared to 2022-23.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful for the response. The IPSAH's sixth priority of the 8 investments that work for physical activity states that sport and recreation opportunities must target audiences where the need may be greatest or participation rates are at their lowest, and the Scottish Government agrees with this. The Loch Centre in Tranent does exactly this. Does the Minister agree with me that while it is right and proper that local authorities decide how local funding is distributed to its communities and in turn decide how to provide and maintain community and sporting facilities, they must have the political and practical support from the Government to meet this need properly?
Minister.
I think the member makes a very strong point. The benefits of physical activity and sport as part of that is huge across our country, and it is really important that we all work together. So local authorities, Scottish Government, Sport Scotland working hand in hand. We absolutely understand the particular challenges that we face in terms of the estate. That's why the Sport Scotland have been tasked with doing a piece of work to look at facilities across Scotland in terms of how they can be sustainable in the long term. It's also why the government's programme for government mentioned a working group working with our partners in COSLA and Sport Scotland to look at how we can better use all of that estate, particularly the schools estate, where we can see in many occasions is the best facility located in a community but is often inaccessible to members of that community. So we need to do more, but we need to do it in partnership.
Thank you, Minister. I can squeeze in question number 8 if I have succinct questions and answers. Question number 8, Dr Gohani joining us remotely.
To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with Glasgow City Council and Glasgow Life regarding the future provision of public services and facilities in the region, including the Glasgow National Hockey Centre.
Minister.
Thank you, President Officer. The Scottish Government are fully aware of local authorities are facing challenging financial circumstances, particularly in maintaining and operation of facilities, largely due to energy costs and other costs of living pressures. The Scottish Government will continue to meet with COSLA and individual local authorities on a regular basis to cover a range of topics, including current and future budget processes. It is vital that all avenues are explored to ensure, where possible, that local clubs and communities have access to sport and leisure facilities.
Dr Gohani.
I'm sure the Minister will be aware that the Hockey Centre in Glasgow is the 2014 Commonwealth Games legacy venue, and a question mark now hangs over the future of the viability of the facility. Scottish Hockey has a potential investor, but I'm told that progress has been slow due to inactivity on the part of Glasgow Life. No one wants to lose potential investment in a valuable sporting venue in Glasgow. So will the Minister intervene to ensure the future of the facility and the many clubs which use it?
Minister.
The member, I'm sure, will be well aware that Glasgow, like other local authorities, are democratically elected institutions, and it is absolutely appropriate important that this Parliament respects the democratic mandates of our local councillors across Scotland. In terms of the specifics in terms of Scottish Hockey, I know that Scottish Hockey have written to the Minister for Sport, and a response will be coming to Scottish Hockey in due course.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes general questions, and we will now move on to the next item of business, which is First Minister's questions. And at question number 1, I call Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Deputy First Minister was interviewed last week about Michael Matheson's dishonesty. She was asked if SNP ministers always tell the truth. She was given multiple opportunities to answer with a simple yes, but she didn't. So let me give her another opportunity today. Do Scottish Government ministers always tell the truth?
Deputy First Minister.
Presiding Officer, before I answer the member's question, can I begin by paying tribute to the late Lord James Douglas Hamilton. Lord James had a long and distinguished career as a public servant in 3 parliamentary chambers, including, of course, this one. Those of us who served alongside him here remember a kind, funny and warm gentleman who embodied the spirit of cross-party friendship and collaboration, which is part of the ethos of this Parliament and has served us well. On behalf of the Scottish Government, I offer my condolences to Lord James' family and to his friends. In terms of Douglas Ross's question, of course, it's for Douglas Ross to decide on his questions, but it is very telling that for weeks now he's had nothing to say on the Tory autumn statement that has been devastating for Scotland's public services, nothing on the cost of living crisis, nothing to say on Grangemouth, nothing to say on the climate emergency as leaders gather to discuss the biggest challenge of our age. Of course, these are Tory priorities. But can I answer about his question about what I said? Of course, ministers should tell the truth. What I was referring to was the fact that sometimes people get things wrong. Sometimes people make mistakes, including, of course, Douglas Ross himself, who made a mistake worth around £28,000 when he was late with his outside earnings. Of course, ministers should always tell the truth.
Douglas Ross.
Well, can I begin on an area where we will agree? Lord James Douglas Hamilton was a true gentleman and a friend to everyone he worked with, not just in Holyrood and at Westminster as a minister, an MP and a member of the House of Lords, but also as a local councillor where he started his career in public service. And I think the tributes we have seen across the political spectrum have helped his wife Susie and their children and the wider family at this difficult time, and they are all in our thoughts today. But that was quite a telling answer. First of all, the Deputy First Minister was basically saying there are more important issues than a government minister claiming £11,000 of taxpayers' money and thinking he could get away with it. That's why this issue is important. And the simple question was, do Scottish Government ministers always tell the truth? We still haven't had a yes or no answer. We've had a conditional answer that they would try to, but sometimes they make mistakes. But that is not what is at heart here. It's what Michael Matheson claimed for. It's about what he said, what he did, and then the cover-up. Because it's quite clear now that this SNP government defends dishonesty. Michael Matheson claimed taxpayers' money when he shouldn't have. He changed his story. He made up ludicrous excuses. So let me ask the Deputy First Minister this. Does she seriously believe that Michael Matheson has been 100% honest throughout this scandal?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, Michael Matheson has, of course, reimbursed the Parliament in full for the costs incurred. And, of course, Michael Matheson also set out his position in his personal statement in detail. And, of course, he has also referred himself to the Scottish Parliament corporate body. He has also recognised, importantly, that he should have handled the situation better, and he's accepted responsibility, and he's rightly apologised in full. The appropriate thing now, of course, is to allow the Scottish Parliament corporate body to look into this matter, and I'm sure that is something they will do with a pace that is required.
Douglas Ross.
Well, of course Michael Matheson could have handled the situation better. He could have told the truth. He could have been honest. And we can't park this issue to the Scottish Parliament investigation because they are looking at the claim made for taxpayers to pay £11,000 of a bill. They're not looking at the statements made which now seem to have been dishonest from Michael Matheson. Let's remember, he's the MSP that once bragged about watching 6 football matches in a single weekend. But now he wants us to believe that when he was on holiday, he never watched the games, he never knew the football was on, and he never spoke to anyone about it. And when a giant bill came in, he was completely clueless about it. So can I ask the Deputy First Minister, does she seriously expect the public to believe a word of this story?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, as I said, Michael Matheson has set out the circumstances and the way in which he handled it in the course of his personal statement. And as for the matters that the Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body will look into, that is a matter for them. They obviously can refer the matter elsewhere if they feel that would be the appropriate thing to do. Michael Matheson has given a full account to this Parliament, and he also opened himself up to questions from members of this Parliament. As he has accepted he should have handled the situation better, he's accepted responsibility and he's rightly apologised for that. And I think the appropriate thing now is to allow the Scottish Parliamentary Corporate Body to look into this. The reason I said what I said at the beginning about Douglas Ross's priorities is that Douglas Ross has had nothing to say about an autumn statement given by the Tory Chancellor that has given no money whatsoever for public services for this government, for this country, for our public services for next year. I actually think the public are pretty concerned about that, because that will impact on every part of the public sector across Scotland. If the Tories don't care about that, the SNP certainly does care about that.
Deputy First Minister Douglas Ross.
Well, of course, I have spoken about the autumn statement, the £545 million extra money coming to the Scottish Government to spend on public services. But the public are also speaking about this, about how one of the most senior members of the SNP government, one of the highest paid ministers in Scotland, tried to claim £11,000 of taxpayers' money for his iPad bill. But the problem for the SNP government is the public don't believe Michael Matheson. A poll yesterday showed the vast majority of Scots believe he should stand down, and that included a majority of SNP voters who believe Michael Matheson needs to go. Now, they can see he's not focused on the day job. In the middle of an NHS crisis, the public need to trust the Health Secretary. They don't. Nurses and doctors, when they meet him, need to know that he's honest. He's not. The Health Secretary has lost the confidence of the country, and he needs to go for the good of our NHS. This week, the Deputy First Minister said the public sector workforce would need to shrink. Shouldn't that start with sacking Michael Matheson?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, of course, what Douglas Ross didn't refer to in the poll was that 72% were dissatisfied with Rishi Sunak's performance as the Prime Minister, and, of course, 54% of people support independence for Scotland. In terms of Michael Matheson getting on with the job, Michael Matheson is getting on with the job of being Health Secretary, ahead of what, of course, is expected to be a challenging winter for the Health Service. If Douglas Ross cared anything about the NHS, he would be objecting to the fact that next year only £10.8 million has been given to the NHS from the UK Tory government. Less than £11 million. I think actions speak louder than words. I don't think Douglas Ross and the Tories care about the NHS if they're prepared to support the Tory government on that matter. In terms of what the Health Secretary has been doing this week, he has announced £42 million of funding for an extra 153 doctor training places next year, the largest annual expansion on record. And, of course, he met with the Royal College of Nursing to discuss our agenda for change and to hear about the issues facing nurses. And on that point, of course, there's no money for agenda for change pay from this Tory government for next year, which is an absolute outrage.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. Question number 2, Anna Summer.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I start by echoing the comments about Lord James Douglas Hamilton and his sad passing and send condolences to his family? I never had the privilege of meeting him, but I think you can tell from all the comments from right across the political spectrum in how much high regard he was held. Deputy Presiding Officer, for weeks now, the Health Secretary has been trying to save his job while the crisis in the NHS continues. And things are getting worse. In 1 week, over 1,000 patients waited over 12 hours to be seen at A&E. Tens of thousands are waiting for crucial diagnostic tests, including cancer. And waiting lists are now the longest they have ever been. 828,398 Scots are now on an NHS waiting list. And over 80,000 of them have been waiting for over a year. But tragically, for many, they will never receive treatment. So can the Deputy First Minister tell us how many people died last year while on an NHS waiting list?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, can I first of all say the Government and I take these matters very seriously indeed. These are challenging figures, and we know, of course, that behind the figures are people who are waiting too long for treatment. Long waits are regrettable. We have seen a significant reduction in the longest waits since those targets were announced, and we've also seen some improvements in diagnostic waiting times. The latest figures also show that NHS activity has increased. In terms of the actions that we are taking. We are committed to further reductions through our £1 billion investment in the NHS recovery plan to increase capacity to help the NHS recover from COVID, and of course in each of the next 3 years will provide NHS boards with £100 million to help to reduce inpatient and day case waiting lists by an estimated 100,000 patients and deliver year-on-year reductions. Of course, none of this is made easier by the complete lack of funding from the UK Tory government and next year's NHS requirements.
Anna Sauer.
Deputy Returning Officer, I mean, the government's head is absolutely in the sand. 828,398 of our fellow Scots are on an NHS waiting list, and that's the pathetic answer we get from the government. Now, our freedom of information request to health boards show that in the past year, 24,567 people died while on an NHS waiting list. 24,567. Many of these people waiting anxiously, often in pain, for potentially life-saving tests and operations. 2 years ago, Humza Yousaf launched an NHS recovery plan that has failed. Things have got worse, not better. But rather than having a government that's focusing on these problems, we have a First Minister and a Health Secretary going from crisis to crisis. When lives are being lost, surely we need a Health Secretary and a government focused on doing their jobs, not saving their jobs.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, the Health Secretary and indeed the entire government is focused on the NHS because these are serious statistics and they are, of course, as I said earlier, behind every statistic is a person and a family, and I deeply regret anyone who, the fact that anyone has lost their life while on an NHS waiting list. But of course, these issues and challenges are not unique to the Scottish Health Service. Every health system is under the same amount of challenge. The Welsh Health Minister said just a couple of weeks ago, the NHS in Wales, like other healthcare systems, is facing the most challenging financial pressure in recent history. This is due to the impact of continued increasing demand on services, persistently high inflation on costs, including energy, medicines and pay-related pressures, in addition to the impact of the pandemic and ongoing COVID-related costs. We are all facing these challenges. And of course, as I set out in my first answer, some of the actions that we are taking, the £1 billion NHS recovery plan, the £300 million investment over the next 3 years to bring down inpatient and day case waiting lists. I would have thought that was something Jackie Baillie would have welcomed rather than talking from a sedentary position. But none of this is made easier by the £10.8 million that we have received or will receive in consequentials for the NHS.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister.
But let me be clear.
Anna Sarwar. We need to move to Anna Sarwar. Anna Sarwar, please answer your next question.
Deputy Presiding Officer, it's not working. People are dying and waiting lists are going up. Our NHS is in crisis, patients are being failed and staff are burnt out, and we have a Health Secretary fighting to save his job. I would say to SNP backbenchers, this is your constituents on these NHS waiting lists. Perhaps show some care for them. And after 16 years of SNP government, it keeps getting worse, not better. Shona Robertson was the Health Secretary who promised to end delayed discharge, but numbers are still on the rise. Humza Yousaf was the Health Secretary who promised to bring down waiting lists, but in the 2 years since his failed recovery plan, they've gone up 28%. That's 182,000 more people on NHS waiting lists. And Michael Matheson was appointed to fix the mess, but today we reveal that over 24,000 people have died on an NHS waiting list in the past year. Deputy First Minister, won't you accept that NHS patients and staff can't afford yet another winter with a failing SNP Health Secretary and a failing SNP government?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, as I said earlier on, these challenges, and they are challenges, are affecting every healthcare system in these islands. There's nothing exceptional about the Scottish Health Service or the challenges facing it, even though Labour would try to make it so. And if you look at the comments I gave from the Labour Health Minister in Wales. They are facing exactly the same problems. There's nothing exceptional about the problems facing the NHS in Scotland. And the action that we are taking, I have set out in my answer previously. We are investing, we'll continue to invest, we'll continue to make sure that funding goes to the front line and not follow Tory spending plans. What won't be helped, though, is, of course, the Labour Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting's answer that seems to be to open the door for the private sector to come into the NHS. I don't think that's the answer for Scotland's health service going forward. This government will invest in a publicly funded, publicly run health service, and we will not be privatising it.
I call question number 3, Claire Hockey.
To ask the Deputy First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to tackle any stigma associated with disclosing a diagnosis of HIV in light of World AIDS Day on the 1st of December.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, tackling stigma is a significant part of our work towards HIV transmission elimination by 2030. And of course, it's good to see so many members across the chamber wearing their red ribbons today. This commitment is clear within the Sexual Health and Bloodborne Virus Action Plan published this week and the HIV Transmission Elimination Plan, which will follow shortly. We funded the excellent anti-stigma campaign developed by the Terence Higgins Trust, the UK's first television campaign on HIV/AIDS in nearly 4 decades. Terence Higgins Trust estimates it has already reached almost 10.5 million UK viewers and listeners throughout broadcast media and 43% of the adult population in the STV region. Building on this, we'll continue to work with healthcare professionals and the public to raise awareness and to dispel myths around HIV so that people living with the virus can do so without fear of stigma and discrimination.
Claire Hockey.
I thank the Deputy First Minister for that answer. During the debate marking World AIDS Day this week, it was very welcome that members across this chamber were united in their will to end HIV transmission in Scotland by 2030. Can the Deputy First Minister say any more about the steps which the Scottish Government is taking to achieve this ambitious goal?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, a vast amount of work is underway as part of the Sexual Health and BBV Action Plan, which was published on Tuesday, and the HIV Delivery Plan, which will be published shortly. This includes working with 3 NHS boards to pilot HIV opt-out testing in A&E departments, following an developing an e-PrEP clinic and supporting our third sector partners in continued community engagement such as fast-track cities.
And supplementary, Jamie Green.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Let us never forget that the H in HIV stands for human, and there really aren't enough minutes in the day to name even a handful of the people this world has lost to AIDS over the last 40 years. Many suffered that illness in the face of prejudice, ignorance and bigotry, I'm afraid to say. It's good to see that science has come on so well in the last 40 years, but there is still so much more to do. So can I ask the Deputy First Minister if she will ensure that the Government in Scotland pulls out all stops to make sure that we end new transmissions of HIV by 2030, but in doing so also pay tribute to the incredible organisations who work day in and day out to tackle that danger much greater than the virus itself, the danger of stigma.
Deputy First Minister.
Can I very much agree with Jamie Green, and I think that I would want to join with him very much in paying tribute to those organisations that have worked for many decades, from really, really difficult times when stigma was commonplace in every walk of life, to a position now that thankfully we have moved on a lot from that stigma, although too many people still suffer from it. And that's why this campaign is so important, to break down those barriers, and of course stands very much in stark contrast from some of the media campaigns from those decades ago. So I would want to join with Jamie Green and others in playing our role as leaders within this Parliament and leaders within Scotland to make sure that we play our role in breaking down that stigma even further.
Question number 4, Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Deputy First Minister when the Scottish Government will publish the results of the A96 corridor review.
Deputy First Minister.
So the Government remains committed to making improvements to the A96, including dualling Inverness to Nairn and the Nairn bypass, despite the stark challenges we now face on our capital budget as a result of the UK Government's autumn statement, which, taking into account inflation, is forecast to result in an almost 10% real terms cut.
Members, we need to hear the Deputy First Minister.
Funding. So, just in case you didn't hear that, nearly a 10% real terms cut in our capital funding. I'm acutely aware of the importance of the route to those that live and work in the north and north east of Scotland. The current plan is to fully dual the route, and as part of this process, we're undertaking the corridor review. The review's initial consultation generated 11,000 different options to improve the corridor, and it's only right that these are fully appraised. I'm expecting Transport Scotland's advice on the emerging outcomes before the end of the year. Following consideration by ministers, there will be a consultation on the outcomes and an update on timings for this, which will be provided by the Cabinet Secretary in due course.
Liam Kerr.
This review, which was ordered simply to appease the Green Party, was supposed to be published over a year ago. And the fact is that in 2011, the SNP promised the people of the North East that the A96 would be dualled fully by 2030. And over a decade of prevarication, millions of taxpayer pounds, endless excuses later, nothing, not even a mention of Aberdeen to Huntly in the programme for government. Deputy First Minister, the people of the North East want a straight answer. Will the SNP fulfil the promise to fully dual the A96 between Inverness and Aberdeen by 2030? Yes or no?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I think Liam Kerr's pretty insulting, actually, to that consultation that's generated 11,000 different options to improve the corridor. That's a bit insulting to all those who have taken the time to contribute to that consultation. Given the level of interest, I would suggest that that was the right thing to do. As I said in my initial answer, I'm expecting Transport Scotland's advice on the emerging outcomes before the end of the year. Following that, the Cabinet Secretary will provide an update in due course. I've said we remain committed to making the improvements to the A96, including dualling Inverness to Nairn and the Nairn bypass. But if Liam Kerr is serious about the importance of infrastructure, why are they then supporting the Tory spending plans that cut capital by 10% over the next 5 years, because it's capital that is required to build roads and other infrastructure projects? So the Tories are cutting the amount of money available to do these things and are making no objection, as I can see it, to their Tory government down south. I would call that hypocrisy, Presiding Officer.
And supplementary, Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, may I ask the Deputy First Minister a simple question? By what year will the construction of the Nairn bypass be completed?
Deputy First Minister.
So, first of all, as the First Minister confirmed to the member during our programme for government statement to Parliament on the 5th of September, I want to reiterate we're fully committed to making improvements to the A96, and that, of course, includes dualling the Inverness to Nairn section, including the Nairn bypass, which already has ministerial consent following a public local inquiry. Just also can advise that Transport Scotland continues to progress the significant work required to prepare for the publication of made orders, including the compulsory purchase order, with a view to completing the statutory process as soon as possible. In terms of our infrastructure investment plan, I have said that we will set out that plan alongside the budget in the light of the changes that will have to be made in the light of the cut to our capital budget of 10% over the next 5 years. But I can say to Fergus Ewing, the commitments that I've laid out in my answer are commitments that we will make.
Question number 5, Pam Duncan-Clancy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to reports that some young people are leaving school struggling to read.
Deputy First Minister.
So I think it's important to look at the facts, and the facts are that pass rates this year for English National 5, higher and advanced higher, are the same as or higher than pass rates that were pre-pandemic in 2019. The PISA 2018 reading results, which looks at the reading abilities of 15-year-olds, confirmed that Scotland was above the OECD average, and 82% of pupils who left school in 2021-22 had achieved the SCQF level 5 or above in literacy. And clearly, any young person leaving school struggling to read is unacceptable, but the evidence shows that our young people continue to achieve well in literacy and English, and their achievements should not be downplayed at all. We should be celebrating those achievements.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
I thank the Deputy First Minister for that answer, and I agree that reading and writing, of course, are fundamental to future and unlocking a young person's potential. But I'm really worried about the response, because 1 in 3 children in Scotland are struggling to read. The EIS say that early years teachers are reporting an increase in the number of children presenting in Primary 1 with delayed development and poorer minimal speech and language skills, and the national primary school literacy attainment gap has grown to the highest rate since 2018. And, of course, the Deputy First Minister will be aware of reports over the weekend highlighting concerns from Scottish teachers that students are leaving secondary school functionally unable to read, a situation former teacher Annie Glennie describes as unforgivable. So can I ask the Deputy First Minister, does she recognise that this is a growing problem, and can she set out what the Government intends to do about it?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, let me say, first of all, on a point of agreement with Pam Duncan-Glancy, there has obviously been an impact from the pandemic on the development of many children's speech and language in particular. We understand that, which is why it is important to make sure those supports are in place to help those young people to catch up on the developmental skills that they require. But in terms of the points of the results, as I said in my answer, the pass rates this year for English National 5, higher and advanced higher, are the same as or higher than the pass rates pre-pandemic in 2019. So we're talking about slightly different things here. I will acknowledge absolutely the point about developmental needs, including, importantly, speech and language therapy. But let's not talk down the results of our young people, which are actually, in the circumstances, very good indeed, and something that we should congratulate them on achieving.
And supplementary, Ros McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. It's very challenging to deliver good outcomes for children who leave secondary school struggling to read if we don't address literacy in early years and primary. Latest statistics show that 1 in 5 Primary 1 pupils fail to achieve the expected level in reading, and I note the comments regarding COVID. But as it is the Deputy First Minister and the Government's job to deal with the after-effects of COVID, where is the appropriate investment in our schools to ensure that no child is left behind, as per the Scottish Government's promise?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, not a penny of investment for schools was given in the autumn statement. Not a penny. Not 1 penny. And the Tory benches have almost to a person...
Deputy First Minister, please resume your seat for a second. We need to hear the Deputy First Minister's response. Thank you. Deputy First Minister.
The Tory benches, Presiding Officer, almost to a person, have advised and demanded, actually, that I follow Tory spending plans as set out in the autumn statement. If I did that, what that is going to mean is not a penny of extra investment in our schools or public services, apart from the £10.8 million for the health service, which is a drop in the ocean. So this Government will not follow Tory spending plans, because we recognise the need to invest in our schools, in our hospitals and our police service. So we will set out our budget plans on the 19th of December, but they certainly won't replicate the reckless disinvestment of public services that we see from this Tory Government, supported by those benches over there.
Question number 6, Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Deputy First Minister what steps the Scottish Government is taking to mark the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence.
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I think we should all be shocked that in the 21st century, violence, abuse and harassment remain an everyday occurrence for women and girls. and we continue to have to take action to prevent and tackle it domestically and globally as a government, as society and as individuals. In addition to the informed debate yesterday, which I heard and I thought was very good, next week alongside COSLA we will publish a refresh of our Equally Safe strategy, which is aimed at preventing and eradicating violence against women and girls and focusing on early intervention, prevention and support services. Our £19 million of annual funding from our Delivering Equally Safe Fund supports 121 projects from 112 organisations, and almost 32,000 people benefited from those support services last year.
Rona Mackay.
Thank the Deputy First Minister for that answer. During the 16 days debate yesterday, we heard about the need for the perpetrators of abuse and violence to change their behaviour, but we know that it continues. Does the Deputy First Minister agree with me it's therefore vital that we change our justice system, including establishing a sexual offences court, so that victims of sexual abuse no longer feel, as they have told the Justice Committee, that they are re-traumatised by the court process?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I think Rona Mackay makes a very important point. There is absolutely a need for reform, and I want to recognise the bravery of survivors of sexual violence who have spoken out to call for change. They've been clear that the personal cost of pursuing justice is too high, and it's left many re-traumatised. And that's why the proposals contained in the Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Bill, like establishing a sexual offences court, are so important. And collectively, these reforms put victims at the heart of our criminal justice system and create a system that recognises and responds to the trauma experienced by victims and survivors to ensure that victims maintain confidence in our justice system.
Thank you. We will now move on to constituency and general supplementaries, and I call Cocab Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday marked 10 years since a police helicopter crashed into the Clutha Bar in the city centre of my constituency of Glasgow Kelvin, tragically killing 10 people and injuring 31. The Clutha Bar was rebuilt and opened again in 2015. A subsequent air accident investigation informed improvements to aircraft safety regulations, but the painful memory of that disaster still runs deep amongst my local communities. Will the Deputy First Minister join me in paying tribute to the emergency services, the families and the wider Glasgow community who pulled together in the face of such a tragedy as we remember all those affected?
Deputy First Minister.
Yes, I absolutely will, and I thank Cocab Stewart for the question. The events of 10 years ago are still fresh in my mind. I remember it really well, and I'm sure they are of all those in the chamber. My thoughts continue to go out to all those impacted by what happened that night, to those who were injured, those who tragically lost loved ones, and also to the emergency services who showed such bravery trying to save lives. I also remember the way that the community came together to show solidarity with all those affected by the disaster. In the hardest of times, the people of Glasgow showed a strength and compassion that we'll never forget, and it's right that 10 years on we remember those who are affected by the loss of life, but also the communities that are impacted to this day.
I call Sue Webber.
Deputy First Minister, the use of mobile phones has been highlighted as one of the most frequent and disruptive behaviours in schools. Lisa Kerr, head teacher of Gordonston, has stated, "Teenagers rarely thank adults for placing boundaries, but we will never forgive ourselves if we don't act now." The evidence is there. For the sake of our children's futures and our teachers' well-being, will the Deputy First Minister commit to take immediate steps to ban and restrict mobile phone use in our schools as soon as possible?
Deputy First Minister.
So, as I understand, councils would already be able to do that, but we'll make sure that Sue Webber gets a full response to her question. And she raises a reasonable point, I think, that mobile phones can be disruptive. And of course, the Education Secretary set out in her statement yesterday many of the issues regarding behaviour in our schools. So we'll make sure that the Education Secretary writes to Sue Webber with further details on that.
I call Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, anyone who walked from the bus or train station this morning will have walked past homeless people sleeping in the street. We now know that last year 244 of our fellow citizens in Scotland died while homeless. with 15,000 Scots currently homeless, can I ask the Deputy First Minister what steps are the Scottish Government taking to support people who will be rough sleeping over the coming festive period?
Deputy First Minister.
Alex Rowley raises a really important point, and of course it is very much our ambition to eradicate rough sleeping from our streets, and we're taking a number of actions to do so. In terms of the issues of the homelessness more broadly, Scotland, of course, has the strongest rights in the UK for people experiencing homelessness, and we have taken action on local connection, on extending unsuitable accommodation orders. And in terms of the funding, in addition to the funding that goes through local government, we're giving councils £30.5 million each year to help prevent homelessness, and we're providing £100 million from our multi-year Ending Homelessness Together fund. And of course, we have also given monies to try to reduce the use of temporary accommodation. Housing First is also being funded in order to help people with complex needs, which we know is the case for many. And can I just say, in terms of the deaths, the estimated 244 deaths, I regret every one of those deaths. It is a tragedy, and behind all those figures is a person and a family, and we should remember that.
I call Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Earlier this week, NHS Orkney was moved to the first stage of formal escalation by the Scottish Government. NHS Orkney is far from the only health board in Scotland whose financial position is precarious, with debt levels rising. But there are particular challenges faced by a small island health board. So can the Deputy First Minister confirm that the Government will respond positively to any request for assistance from NHS Orkney? And will every effort be made to help NHS Orkney achieve financial stability as soon as possible, while at the same time ensuring patient needs and staff well-being are safeguarded?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, can I say to Liam MacArthur, these are important matters, and I can say to him that the Scottish Government is directly engaging with NHS Orkney and will be looking to provide tailored support to support the board going forward, because it is important as we enter winter that NHS Orkney, alongside other boards, are well prepared to meet the challenges that winter will bring. And I'm sure the Health Secretary will be happy to update Liam MacArthur on some further details about the support that will be provided. I call Bob Doris.
Presiding Officer, after First Minister's questions, a meeting with campaigners have been fighting to get a fair deal for clients of McClure solicitors following the firm going bust in 2021. It is estimated there could be as much as 100,000 people impacted UK-wide, and complaints I have received include what they consider exorbitant fees charged by solicitors to remedy errors or to make changes to trusts, as well as families discovering trusts were never set up by McClure's despite fees having been paid. Can I ask the Deputy First Minister how the Scottish Government can seek to support impacted families, as well as what reforms could be considered to prevent such failings happening in the future?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, I am aware of the issues that Bob Doris raises and the number of families that are facing difficulties as a result of McClure's going into administration. And whilst I can't comment on individual cases, the Scottish Government has taken proactive steps to help mitigate against such a situation. Such cases show the need for legal regulation that centres on the public interest and protection of the consumer. The Regulation of Legal Services Scotland Bill, currently going through Parliament, will introduce the authorisation of legal businesses, and this will bring benefits such as consistency in how legal firms are regulated, with all entities having to meet the same high standards, and a greater collation of data which would enable the regulator and the legal profession to identify and address deficiencies early, taking the necessary preventative action.
I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The UK Government is banning XL bully dogs after a spate of horrific attacks, some fatal. But the SNP has refused to sign up to this plan. It looks like they're willing to risk public safety just to diverge from the rest of the UK. So will the Deputy First Minister U-turn and ban XL bullies before more people get hurt?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, that is a complete misrepresentation of the facts by Russell Finlay. So let me say what is actually happening. We are carefully considering the evidence on the XL bully dogs and whether similar changes to ban this breed should be applied in Scotland. Public safety is paramount in our deliberations. Scotland already has a dog control notice regime that is unique in the UK and focused on preventing dog attacks from happening in the first place. But we remain concerned about the reported attacks and deaths due to suspected XL bully dogs. And, of course, the UK Government announced the proposal to ban XL bullies without any notice to the Scottish Government and no consultation, which was perhaps not the most helpful way to proceed. So we are carefully considering the evidence, and we're meeting with a range of stakeholders and animal welfare organisations, and we will take forward those considerations as swiftly as we can, and I'm sure that the Cabinet Secretary will update Parliament in due course.
I call Michael Mara.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. 8 years ago, the construction began of hundreds of houses in the Western Gateway area of Dundee. Those buying homes were promised a school and paid an additional £5,000 on a roof tax to help pay for it. After the failure of SNP councillors to secure funding, there appears now to be no plan on how to get that school built. This week, I received a letter from the Education Secretary reassuring me that the Scottish Government remains committed to working with the Council, but without a funding commitment, it's just empty words. So if the SNP in Dundee have failed to deliver this school, they have failed the community. Will the Deputy First Minister commit today that the Government will find a way forward to getting this school built?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, of course, the Education Secretary, when she set out the latest round of LEAP funding, had looked at those schools that were in the bottom categories of requiring to be refurbished. She also took into account some of the issues of RAC that have been raised in this chamber to come to the conclusions of the priorities that should be given to the latest round of LEAP funding. What she also set out, though, was that there would be further discussions with COSLA in order to set out what comes next in terms of the funding of the school estate going forward. But this government has invested hugely in the school estate over the last few years to bring up to scratch schools across the country, and those schools now remaining in the poorest category is much smaller than when this government came to power.
And I call Mark Ruskell.
Today, world leaders are gathering for COP28, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The UN has warned that current climate pledges are falling short of the action that we need, and that we're on course for a brutal 3 degrees of global heating this century. So it is deeply concerning to hear reports that the UAE is attempting to strike fossil fuel deals at COP, worsening climate injustice for people already living on the brink of disaster. Does the Deputy First Minister then agree with me that at COP28 we need to see a just and credible plan for the end of fossil fuels, not secretive backroom deals?
Deputy First Minister.
Well, at COP26, we were the first global North government to commit funding to address loss and damage. A year ago, COP27 saw both a breakthrough agreement on a loss and damage fund and a disappointing lack of progress on reducing emissions and keeping 1.5 alive. No nation has all the answers or the means to respond to the scale of the problem of climate change alone, which is why the bringing together of the global community at COP28 is so important. And Scotland has much to offer at COP28. The First Minister is participating in this year's summit to demonstrate once again our commitment to tackling the twin crises of climate change and nature loss in tandem and in a way that is just and fair for all. He will also ensure that Scotland continues to play a bridging role, ensuring the voice of women, young people and the global south influence debate and influence action.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a members' business debate in the name of Mark Ruskell, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and in the public gallery to do so before the debate starts. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please, subscribe to and share our channel, or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.